Hi folks, I'm back in with fourth podcast on the experience and deepening on feelings through maybe using a bit of Righteous Will and also some other modalities that help us to deepen and connect to this part of ourselves that is the will, that is the part of us that only feels and generally on a planet is highly undeveloped, if one can put it that way. It's a beautiful night here because we lost electricity, so I've got candles everywhere, and fortunately my iPad is powered up, so I can do the whole podcast and then mix it later on for the production. So last time we were actually talking about karma. We were on page 7, which is Roman numerals number 7 in Righteous Will, introduction. Maybe I returned myself to one paragraph before I finished, so for those to whom I have listened to the podcast number 3 a couple of days ago, they will just bring you on the same page. So it says you need to realize then that in triggering yourself and releasing denial from your own energy field, you will no longer need to draw to yourself any unpleasantness. So we're basically talking about karma here. Yeah. Now, karma is not something like we need to really associate as much with past lives as it is more whatever we denied in ourselves. You could be having karma just from this lifetime, something you learn as a child to do, and then you're still doing it, and you might not even be aware that you're doing it. So anything that the world reflects is the work. Like I said before, you get triggered. First question is to realize, oh, I'm triggered. The next one is, how does this make me feel? Now, what you don't necessarily need to get to is, what is the name of that which you think you feel in that moment? Because you would have to be naming something that you've named before, right? So you just want to get in touch with this feeling, allow yourself to feel it, and maybe ask yourself this: is it okay that I feel like this? And wait for the answer, not necessarily from your head. Just look, it's like, is that okay? And it's very simple, because it's either yes or it is no. There is no in between. Like, we're not looking for, well, maybe, right? It's a yes or no. 100% yes is yes. 99% yes is actually no. So that's kind of radical distinction, either or, okay. But ideally what you're really looking for is the yes or no. Which one of those two is more authentic? That's what we're looking for. More authentic. If you say it's okay and you begin to feel a flow in you, then you possibly answered correctly. If you say yes and nothing's changing, nothing's moving inside you, I don't know if you can remember this, but the difference between moving feeling and just feeling that's been sitting there since the beginning of time, yeah, like a frozen feeling that's not moving, even so you might be calling it grief or sadness, it's still just that same old thing that has not evolved yet. Feelings need to evolve together with the mind. Instead, mind went ahead, and more it went ahead, the more it convinced itself that it's fine to be that way. And that is a major trap, because your capacity to manifest yourself fully as who you are can only happen if your whole feeling realm, your whole feeling self has this movement that whatever feeling arises, it is free to be what it is. If you have, let's say, no, then ask yourself, is it okay that I have no? And again, wait for an answer. This is a real important thing, because you can express feeling and you can sound it out, you can move it. If you have non-acceptance for it, you basically locked it out. And without acceptance, nothing heals, nothing moves. So this acceptance and non-acceptance is a very important subject. And sometimes when you have non-acceptance, you need to check if it's okay to have this non-acceptance. If you're really, really honest, you might find that it's not okay. So we're actually looking at what's true rather than at what is right. Like it should be okay, or I shouldn't have no. So that's a very important thing. So again, situations in the world, I get triggered, I allow the trigger to move inside me, and give it freedom to be what it is and where and how it wants to move. Like, I am going to move this. It's not the way that could be useful to you. This can be a habitual pattern of therapizing or manipulating the feelings. You really want to just step back and find out what is it that your feelings want to do. And most important part for that is that you become present for those feelings in a non-judgmental awareness. So you're aware of the feeling and you're more interested than judgmental. It's like, wow, what is this thing in me trying to tell me? Which you probably have never asked yourself. Maybe ask your mind, but feelings, what is this feeling trying to tell me? Or maybe even better, what is it trying to demonstrate to me? Because feelings don't talk. Period. Thoughts express through words and talking. Feelings express through feeling them and feeling them more and opening space for them to do what they need to do. They are a separate entity. However, when we align with the separate entity, we actually experience unity, or we increase the electromagnetic field and we begin to birth the heart like we've never seen it before. So coming back to the text. So when you have a karma, you will draw to yourself unpleasantness, right? Now here it says, unpleasantness is not sent from God as punishment for misdeeds. Unpleasantness is only drawn in response to what has been denied or judged against. The denial is what gives the experience its unpleasant qualities. Now, you need to realize another thing. You can still take the path of letting experience come to you from without and balance yourself that way. If you want to, in fact, you can even call for the karmic experiences necessary so that you can be triggered to release your own denial. Pleasant experiences will still happen. We are just addressing unpleasant ones right now. You can create even more pleasant experiences and better ones when you have lessened or eliminated denial. Okay? So denial is basically us not allowing the feeling, the free flow it needs to have in order to express. In coming to you, drawn by the denial, unpleasant experiences have not come to punish. They have come to point out that you have denial. They are drawn to you in an attempt to release the energy that is being held there outside of acceptance. So you're holding a feeling, feeling's not okay. Now the feeling is locked up. It's locked up in us. Next minute we're sick, and we think we're sick because la-di-da, but it's because that feeling is feeling unloved and is trying to desperately reach us. The energy locked up in denial does not want to be held outside of the nourishment of the light. Denial wants to draw something to itself that will release it. The intensity needed to trigger you will exactly equal the intensity of your denial. So if you're having some situations that are repeating, something's trying to reach you within you. Instead, we judge what is happening around us and trying to change the outside reality instead of changing that which causes the outside reality. You can release what you have held and denied by your own volition. This is felt to be, by the source of these understandings, the easiest path now available for individuals that would like to heal themselves on earth. You need to try it before you judge it. Yeah, because you might go, oh gosh, here comes another technique, here comes another curriculum of release, and you might have done few already and just still find yourself locked up emotionally somewhere. But this feeling is a secret. Feeling is the secret. Or secret is the feeling. Yeah? What feeling offer, like how the feelings read the space I am in and tells me exactly what to do and what to say, that affects my environment in the most beautiful way, is definitely thank you to these feelings, or thanks to these feelings. So when something comes from outside and you do not know it is coming, it's just because you are disconnected from it. By shifting the power from state of externalized disconnection to internalized conscious acceptance, you can always know what is going to happen. You might not have complete detail because you might have the kind of will that likes surprises, but you will know it will be pleasant. This can give great peace to everyone. Beautiful. So, coming to a next section, which is equally important. Another understanding you need is clearing out the will is going to call for release of limitations you have placed on yourself, the energy to release and express previously. These limitations can be called denials, judgments, misunderstandings, conditional acceptance of the self, or whatever you want to call them. The fastest way to dissolve them is to give them a formal release. You can say whatever you want to say as long as you say it out loud and say that you now forgive yourself or no longer believe these things or now give release to them, or whatever the wording that carries the intent of release for you. So now we're looking at more like the mental attitudes rather than the actual feelings. Yeah? Denials, judgments, misunderstandings, conditions of acceptance of the self. Hey, who is the one that decides that it's not okay to be feeling a certain way? So see, this is mostly the mind. How to do this out loud can be sometimes quite awkward. So you're actually going to have to get used to doing this. You could try now one thing which is really quite fascinating. This is my little invention that came as an understanding from doing these books. And I call it a gray zone. Gray zone is that little voice that's talking to you how you're not doing very well about what you do. Right? Like a little voice that says, see, you screwed up again. Right? Now, next time that voice comes in and says, you should be doing better than you are doing, say it out loud. And say that sentence out loud several times. Like, for example, a very popular one is like, I'm not good enough, or I don't deserve, right? So say it out loud, I don't deserve. But that's a gray zone voice. Like, imagine, close your eyes for a moment, and notice how you're saying that yourself when you're speaking it quietly. Like, I'm not good enough. How do you say it silently? Then give it a voice. Say it louder. But now say it with a higher pitch. I'm not good enough. And the minute you begin to speak these sentences out of that gray zone, you will awaken to yourself that that is actually an insane little voice that's just constantly killing you within. Yeah? And it's so conditioned, and it's so quiet, and it's so on a repeat like a broken record, telling you how you should be doing better than you are. Could be even it could even be a voice of guilt, which is often the case. But usually it's just a judgment. You can also just ask yourself, well, is that true that I'm not good enough? What answer comes in? Is it absolutely true that I'm that way? Because sometimes we have to question all these crazy beliefs we have. So this judgment release, or what we call here formal release out loud, is very important. You could say it with a higher pitch voice. You can say it with a low pitch voice. I'm not good enough. Next minute you're giggling, and we're like, that is actual formal release. You're actually releasing it just by doing it that way. You get out of this nye voice. The little mental one that just doesn't wish you well, but it's just a program. It's nothing else. Or you can use you can get very creative here. Like imagine you say it in a very seductive way. I am not good enough, or something like that. Just get creative. So what other ways you could say that? I am not good enough. or I am not good enough, honey. Right? Like you play with it, and then you realize that you have like hundreds of these little sentences. And when you look at the word sentence, another use of word sentence is a prison sentence. And let me tell you, I'd say good 90% of what we tell ourselves, especially how we're not doing that well, is exactly that sentence that puts us in a prison of that particular thought system that we made up in our mind. So this judgment release is a very important thing to get very good at, because under every judgment there will be certain emotion. When you release judgment, emotion begins to move. When you know how to release that emotion, you might see that there are even deeper judgments underneath that. And then you give formal release to them until it's all out. Nothing stays in, and you begin to live level of association. You're no longer feeling like you're heavy. If you have lots of grievances, in Slovakian there's again such a beautiful translation. It's actually, the word grievance translates as make myself heavy. Yeah? Make myself heavy. So you're not feeling light. You're not feeling like, oh my God, I could just fly right now. In mentioning the necessity of giving a formal release out loud, it's also necessary to bring up this forward. In doing emotional release, sound is very important. Now, this, I could not stress the importance of this, particularly when you have a moment when you go like, oh, okay, how am I feeling? And nothing, and there's no response. Nothing is also quite an amazing feeling. Feeling nothing is a feeling. Be careful, because feeling nothing is quite a popular one. So now, if you can't access a feeling, this is what you do. And you find a frequency that actually tunes well within how you're actually feeling in this moment. What this does, because feelings expressed through sound and their own quality rather than words, that's actually a clear way how these feelings express. For example, when I run men's groups, we have what people call a check-in. And my check-in is like that. So how is it? And the guy goes, oh, and the whole room goes like, wow, man, that's interesting, right? And it's so tangible, and it's so expressive, and it's so clear in precision what he actually means by that. You would have to only try it to again find out how powerful that actually is. So you're making sound for a while, and next minute you're like, oh my God, I can feel what's going on. And now you get really in touch with your will, with your feelings of, not just on a surface or emotional level. You're dropping deep down, deep, deep down. It's so yummy down there. When it's free, that is the kingdom of heaven. That is when you're going to like feel like heaven. Yeah? And it's not necessarily like extreme ecstasy or extreme something, but it's a constant. Like you just feel good for no good reason, and you just continue feeling good. And this programs your will with a feeling good feeling. As you sow, so shall you reap, right? So when you living in a state of feeling good, you are birthing, you are placing into your will more of the same. Sometimes you could actually just practice feeling good for no good reason. Just like, could you allow yourself to feel good? Just say yes. And you will be surprised how really quickly you just feel good. And then you continue feeling good. And don't let some tiny mad idea creep in that's gonna take it. So you're sitting there feeling good. Can you allow it a bit more? Say yes. And your will immediately goes about to manifest that for you. It's not outside of you yet. It's just first within you. Just feel good. Feel good. I did it with my son once because he asked me, so he was like 12. He goes, so what about drugs? I was like, yeah, well, what about drugs? It's like, well, tell me something about it. And so I gave him a little explanation, and I said to him, because I know how kids work with this, kids are incredible. Like in this area, they're so free yet, you know, particularly in that age, they still don't have all these blockages. And particularly my son hasn't had much trauma in his life at all. So I go, hey, you want to get the feeling what it feels like when you take a drug? He goes, yeah. So I go, can you allow yourself to feel good? You should see his face. He goes, yeah. Like straight away. That was not even the yes was necessary. He just went straight in. I was like, boom, his face shape shifted, and he was like, poor, alive. And then I said, now could you allow this feeling a bit more? He goes, oh, no way. Right? It was way too much for him. I said, okay, just stay there. Just stay there. And he said, no, I think I had enough. So that for him, that was like a near-life experience as well. That was already pretty intense. Because this is what happens. When you learn how to manifest something by being in it. See, when your mind is rambling, and I would like to have this, and I like to have that, and I like to have this, and then your will goes like, what do you want me to actually create for you? Staying with one thing. Maybe practice just, if you, of course, if you will. It is not for everyone. But if you would, could you allow yourself to feel good? Say yes. You immediately, I don't know if it's just me, immediately there should be like slight shift towards just feeling good. We'll get to some negative feelings in a moment, but for now, this is the one. And allow yourself to feel good. And you might find that as you're allowing yourself to feel good and you say yes, then I'd say, all right, let's stay here. Just keep allowing it more and more. Make sure you feel it all the way down your feet, your groin, your legs, your torso, in your heart, in your arms and hands. Just feeling good for no good reason, except we're just feeling good. And can you allow it a little bit more now that you see you survived so far? And then just a bit more. For the courageous one, could you allow it like heaps more? Oh my God. I can't do it and talk at the same time. You see? Now, when I discovered this, and this was really interesting because I was on this, like a Right Use of Will page, and it was all about like, if you were not negative about something, you were almost like a bad company or something. Like you were twisted. And one day I woke up and I felt so good. I couldn't believe how good I felt. I was like, oh my God, I feel so good. And I sent this message out, and it says like, you're twisted. I was like, wow. I actually had a genuine experience. And I went and I signed out of all the things that had to do with Right Use of Will globally. So like, I'm just going to do this alone. I'm going to follow these books. I don't need anybody. My God, it was just the best move for me. Anyway, then I decided, because you see, for years doing Right Use of Will, I was expressing negative feelings. I thought that was the key. And I realized in this very moment that I was expressing all this negative stuff all the time. But what about good feelings? I wasn't giving them any chance to evolve. And so I went like full 180-degree turnaround and going like, okay, I'm going to give myself a couple of weeks. Then I'm going to just allow anything that feels good, And I remember first time I went like, I had this real twinkle of joy inside of me. And it was just a tiny little twinkle, like, just a tiny, like, one could lose it just by thinking about something else. And I said, I'm going to give this full expression, full manifestation. So I sat there and I allowed myself to feel only joy. Oh my God. I had like an avalanche of thoughts that came in and told me how I shouldn't be feeling like that. The guilt creeped in. Any kind of like, okay, I really need to get a cup of tea. Oh my God, I should go for a walk now. Or anything to get rid of this will, expressing something on a good side. So that was a quantum shift for me right there, because eventually I realized that I had more negativity come when I was expressing positive feelings than the negative. Of course, this was after years of being in terror, expressing rage, expressing hatred, expressing, name it, shame, like I mentioned before. Suddenly I was in this kind of ecstasy, and I'm a radical guy, so I would just sit like 3 hours in that joy. And it was like, I go like, aha. So I always thought like awakening is like this incredibly intense experience, but it's actually very subtle, but it's constant. So seriously, just allowing yourself to feel good for no good reason and remain in it. Don't get your mind start thinking about something else. See if you can, just for a moment, decide that this is what you're going to do, and anything that creeps in that's not that, well, just put aside for now. So you're not denying it, you're just holding it. Like the thoughts will come in, and I said, you know what, guys? The door is closed, the shop is closed, I'm having a weekend. I was like, I am not listening to all these thoughts. Right now, I'm in conscious denial of anything that would take this particular practice out of my hands. Wow, that was so exquisite. So there it is. Next day I was just feeling good. And next day I would be doing feeling lush, feeling vibrant, feeling alive, feeling like in unity with everything was one of the meditations. Just like, oh, so it's that simple. Just allow yourself to feel godly. And whatever creeps in to tell you how you can't, you gotta say no. I'm just saying yes to this right now. And the will has this amazing capacity, and the more you free it to express this and express it even more and express it even more. So, coming back to the text, I'll start again, that paragraph. So in mentioning the necessity of giving a formal release out loud, it is also necessary to bring forward this. In doing emotional release, sound is very important. I recommend that you spend at least, 5-10 minutes to start off with just making any sound whatsoever. Why? Because this creation is based on vibration, not on a mental diarrhea that keeps flowing in people's heads. And then we're wondering, we have this situation of the world on our hands, yeah? Sound is vibration. To release something and vibrate it away from you, if you do not want it, or get it moving, what? Or get it moving so it will evolve into something you don't want to have with you, you need to use sound. And even body movement that will vibrate your physical being. You need to do whatever the feeling suggests to you. Now, my biggest mistake here, I kept listening to my mind. So whatever you do, like, what does the feeling suggest? And when you ask that question, what happens? Mind is waiting for an answer, or what we call the spirit part of you. Yeah, the thinking part of you is now beginning to communicate with feelings, and also acknowledge that feelings are not going to be talking back as blah blah, but they talk or express in a different fashion. And when that fashion begins to happen, you'll realize you understand it perfectly. It's like this inner movement. When it takes place, you'll go, oh my God, I know this. You always knew it. You just didn't know that was it. Or you might have, of course. I'm making these crazy assumptions. But generally, as I work with people, these are the usually things that we run into, and they often give me this look like, are you for real? But a few minutes later, they're having a real feeling experience, and they go like, uh-oh, tell me more. I want to know. So I'm really sharing like my over 30 years trip with this, and there are times when I wasn't doing this, but when I was doing it, for me, that was always a full-time endeavor. Like, I'm an intense guy. When I put my mind to something, it's like I'm unstoppable. So I read all of these books several times, and I think I read the second book like 25 times, maybe 30. Seriously, a lot. And some sections I would read way more than some others. And like the introduction to fourth book, which just not so long ago put out on YouTube. Oh, wow, that was a game changer. That's loaded, by the way. I'd be very careful going into that, but you can briefly have it's like an informative way of listening to it, even if you haven't read all the other books. I'll talk about those a bit later. But one thing I say now, and is that they need to be read in order. Like, if you knew how much is in every sentence of this book, how much there is, how much data there is actually, when you go through the whole process and you come back and you go like, oh God, I get it, why this is written the way it is. Now, if you have a lot of blockage, you might need to start by making any sound you can make and doing anything you can do. So you're vibrating your body, you're moving, you're jumping, you might be even kicking something. Always make sure you don't hurt yourself. Go slow, like you don't have to straight away hit something really hard, because you might hurt yourself. But you go gently, you know, go like, oh, let me hit this, what it's gonna feel like. Or I used to get a little stick in the nature and I would just walk around and just smash it against the ground and get myself into this state. I don't want to jump in, but this is a really important section that's coming out. If you do this enough in each situation, you will loosen yourself up and reach what is called ignition. Ignition is the point where the release takes you over temporarily, like you're not even doing it. The release takes you and directs you to do exactly what you need to do. You need not control it in any way except to make sure you do not really hurt anyone, and I would add that you don't hurt yourself. Like, for example, if you find yourself screaming and it's really hurting your throat, it's basically your body telling you, hey, this is not exactly what I had in mind. Sometimes you will hurt yourself a little bit, and that's just part of it. Check in, just always check in. It's like, oh, this is hurting too much. Oh, when I'm hitting this is really hurting my back. Just be very careful. All right. You need to accept, here we go, that sometimes injury in a minor way may take place. If your body has been really blocked and has received a lot of physical harm, it may need the feeling that it's going to receive harm again in order to trigger the deeply held and controlled pain. Yeah? Let the will guide this rather than impose a technique. I was reading somewhere else the other day. It's like every twinge of annoyance, it's like this little cover that's covered over this intense fury in us. But we are so conditioned away from expressing fury or rage or even anger because it's so unspiritual. Well, this is going to definitely make a big shift in that. Because when I got in touch with that fury, with that rage, it was so awakening. It was like something moved me to a place I've never been before. So we're pretty much blocked up emotionally, and feelings obviously play a very small role in most people's lives. And therapizing feelings, I've seen a lot of that. It's not necessarily going to have, you're not necessarily going to find acceptance for those feelings, and instead you might shift your view or your perception slightly and actually just hide what's really suffering underneath. So another understanding you need is that you might have to start with judgment release so that the held energy can start moving. Then you follow this with the release of emotions, and then understandings will come. Check this out. Release, if you reach ignition, will bring understandings. You need only practice this to find out what it has to teach you. You will heal yourself and the earth changes will not be difficult for you to survive. I'll give you one good example. So I was living in this community at some point, and I was having an afternoon nap, and there were these two women next door somewhere, and had a very enlightening discussion that made me want to throw up. And I was going to open a door, and I said, "Ladies, is there any chance you could do this somewhere else?" And if I was really honest, my response would be like, "Hey, can you just get out of here?" And my true response, well, at that time I didn't actually have that true responses yet. But then something stopped me, and I remembered this particular section, and I said, "Hey, why don't you use that to get yourself really triggered, right? Until you reach this, what they call about the ignition." So just them making the sound, I just kept listening to them attentively, and I was getting so annoyed by the talk they have. It was so trippy and spiritual. It was just driving me bonkers. But it kept triggering me, and suddenly I lost it. And this ignition kicked in, and I had a release like I never had before. And then I just sat there afterwards, and they kept talking, and I'm kind of like, wow, it completely stopped bothering me, completely. But I was awake in a way that I did not know one could be. So this is really good. So something triggers you, let's say neighbors playing loud music, or some kids are screaming somewhere. I did this the other day. And I always go like, oh my God, this is so good. Sometimes I forget. Sometimes I forget to do it. But at the beginning, this is pure gold. So, I'll read this again now. Release, if you reach ignition, will bring understandings. So suddenly there was so much clarity in my mind. I'm going like, wow, I really can see that I live this like a non-existence in myself. That there is this inner aliveness that's available, but it does not function properly if the emotional intelligence is all locked up. You need only practice this to find out what it has to teach you. You will heal yourself, and the earth changes will not be difficult for you to survive. These earth changes, as you probably noticing, are becoming more and more visible. Yeah, we have these massive rains, we have earthquakes, we have tsunamis, we have so many things going on the planet. There is some kind of shift that's going to happen, and these books will actually prepare you for it. And it says something that no survival skills will help you if your will is locked up. So I don't know if that was just a warning of some kind, but I think there is something that when that shift happens and our feelings cannot guide us, cannot choose the right thing for us, we're going to have some very, very hard times. Okay, so I'm going to leave this section for next time because it jumps straight into some decrees that have been given that God wants us to know. When I read that first time, I had a bit of a chuckle, but I have a very different trust for this material. I trust it deeply because it unchained my will to an extent that I did not know it can be unchained. And what's the very important thing? You know, I'm sure you have in your life moments when your heart really opened. Or let's say you were doing some retreat. You came back from a retreat and you were like so high and so going like, oh my God, I'm free forever. And 2 days later, none of that was available. So this is a little bit like, let me train you how to have that energy flow that you could be living in if the will is free. Because the heart will open, but without will, the minute you shut down the will, the heart will lose that vibration. It will lose its negative. It will lose the ground. And instead of heart leading the way, your mind begins to lead the way again. And overload the thinking mechanism with avalanches of thoughts, and off you go. You go into a very lost place inside. You grab all sorts of tiny made ideas and you begin to elaborate on them, and next minute you look out of the window and you see the world. It's kind of dangerous. Well, a lot of it is made up in our own mind based on this separation from the self. And I would like to add one more thing, is that to practicing doing that slowing down, speaking slower, or even speaking one word, just to see what it manifests in you. Yeah? Like if you say one word and you let it fully incarnate in your will, what is the full incarnation of that word? You will find that many words could become quite exquisite. Like, could you allow yourself to be magnificent, for example? There's somewhere in you is magnificent. Somewhere in you some ugliness. Somewhere in you is a goodness. Somewhere in you might be badness. Yeah? The more we allow all of this, the more richer will we become. And suddenly these negative feelings become actually quite loved, and they begin to show us what is behind them and what gift they have to offer. And I'm not throwing you a carrot here, because this journey is not easy. This introduction, actually the whole first book, it's just like, I call it a mild introduction. It gets really full on when it hits the second book. But for now, I think this was enough. So I'll bring this talk to an end. I'm not really sure how it is to listen to me like this. But sometimes I might be saying things that might not really kick in the first time. So having some of these talks played again, you might go, aha, I'm starting to get what he's actually aiming at. Sometimes I run men's groups, and after even a few years, sometimes men say, oh my God, I think I'm starting to get what it is that you're trying to get across. And I've introduced some materials to my native country, Slovakia, where I was born, and opened up a whole field of people kind of following some of these particular practices on the Course of Love, which is incredible. Helps a lot with feelings as well. There's some profound truth there on feelings. And same thing happens. They go like, and they call me Karchi, right? Some like Slovakian name. And let's go, Karchi. I think I'm finally starting to hear what you were trying to hammer into us. I was like, I wasn't hammering. I was inviting you. No, I was fully hammering. So yeah, I'll bring this to a close, and thanks for hanging in there. And yeah, if just one person gets some of this, I'm happy. And I'm doing this pretty much only because I love it so much. And yeah, so there's more to come. All right, guys, thanks for listening, and I'll be talking to you soon again.